Welcome to the How I Started Career Stories podcast, where we will interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, and company leaders to hear how they got to where they are on their career journey. We'll talk about the early days, the setbacks, the risks they took, and ultimately how they're using their learnings now and into the future. I'm Andrew Capel, your host. Let's get started with this week's episode. Hey everyone, welcome to an episode of the How I Started Career Stories podcast. Joined here today with Alec Sharp. Alec, I got connected viewing some of his webisode tutorials on the Lucid Chart digital whiteboarding application and process mapping series that he did. I think it's still on YouTube these days, so we'll put it in the show notes if anyone wants to check out that series. But that's how we got connected. We spoke a couple of months ago, and Alec has a super interesting story and a rich and extensive background with his current business. So looking forward to welcoming you on.
Well, thanks, Andrew. Great to be here.
Yeah. So typically with How I Started, we break things down into 3 segments, and you can go as far back or as not far back as you'd like, and kind of just talk about your journey, some of the learnings and wisdom that you've picked up and what you're excited about in the future.
Okay, well, I'm not sure about wisdom, but I've certainly picked up a lot along the way. So you said, what's the origin story? I've had almost 45 years as an independent consultant, which is a long time. There have been milestones along the way. So you were wondering, how did it get started? And how far back could I go? Well, I'm going to go way back to when I was a very technical person. I was a systems programmer, database administrator for a large telephone company, and I got assigned to do the database design for a project for the Treasury Department at this telephone company. And I quickly found out that the project leader had no idea what he was doing. He wasn't talking to the business community. He was getting all of his requirements from textbooks, US textbooks. Nothing wrong with that, but this was a Canadian company. And I went back to my desk after my first meeting with this guy, and I said to the woman, Claire Alston, an early mentor, I said to her, I don't know what to do. I mean, this guy, he's clearly out of his depth. And she just tossed me a copy of Structured Systems Analysis by Gain and Sarson. She said, read this, you'll be okay. So I read the first 40 pages, and the next day I came back to work, and I was organizing sort of clandestine guerrilla meetings with the business people and applying what I was learning from this book. And then I would read the next 40 pages and I would apply that. So I built up a pretty good set of models, a good understanding of how the business worked and how they wanted it to work. Meanwhile, I'll cut it short. The project leader, he quit, and then people went looking for, well, what has he actually done for the last year? And it was nothing. So I was able to put my hand up and say, well, excuse me, but, I've been, working on this, and here's what I produced. And so I was a hero. The next thing I knew, even though I had the lowest job title in the entire organization, I was doing presentations to the directors, to the president, to everybody about this new technique, structured systems analysis, and where it was taking me. So the lesson there was don't be afraid to stick your neck out and do what needs to be done. Don't be constrained by your job title.
Right.
And that actually led to the next big thing was I learned that I was being used as an example by the executives in this IT organization of everything that was wrong with their HR policies. Because clearly I should be a fairly senior guy, And my job title at the time was graduate trainee.
Wow.
And in my job duties, it included fetch listings for programmers. So I realized that, when I hired into this company, I was told it was a meritocracy. And what I learned, it was really just all about longevity.
Right.
And so there was a couple of lessons there. Now, I can keep going.
No, no, no. I'm curious. Did you maybe find out or no, did you have like an executive sponsor or someone who, yeah, like made that business case or that case to HR, to say like, hey, our processes are backwards because look at where it's getting us, then look at what Alec's doing.
I had the director of the MIS department
Yeah.
was making the case for me, but this was a very hidebound organization, and it became clear that I was that you just had to put in your tenure. So I wasn't very happy in the job. There was a lot of really great things about it. A
Yeah.
big company, you get to look at facilities and operations. You get a wide range of experience. But I was not very happy, and I was at a party um, celebrating a big project failure. I was told early on in my career, we get together to celebrate our failures, not our successes, which
Yeah.
that's a whole nother story. But I was complaining about life at the phone company. And the woman I complained to, it turned out she went and told other people that Alec is unhappy. And the next thing you knew, my phone was ringing because I had a very in-demand skill set. I was at the time an IMS database designer and pretty good at it. And that's what the market needed. So I got lured out into being an independent consultant.
Oh, wow. So you went
I,
right from a graduate analyst and you haven't looked back.
I doubled my income overnight. I was,
Nice.
mind you, I had to pay my own vacations and health insurance,
Yeah.
but I was out on my own. I had a fascinating contract. It was a 3-month contract that turned into a year and a half. I was hired to do a database design. And then that turned into being the test data coordinator. And even though this was 40 years ago, it was very agile. We were doing a phased implementation, 10 releases instead of a big bang, and test driven development. So I learned a whole lot in that assignment. And then it was just, well, pretty much word of mouth around the city. I started doing more of the same. So there's chapter one,
Okay.
if you will.
Yeah. And
Now,
so that's what you've been doing the last 45 years. Isn't that chapters 1, 2, and 3, or there's more?
no, what happened next? I started experimenting. I had clients that were very generous in giving me a lot of latitude. So I started experimenting with what I was calling at the time subject area data modeling. But it was basically about building enterprise wide concept models. So getting the whole organization to agree on, what do we mean by a customer? What is a customer? What do we need to know? Or product or whatever. So I started doing this, and it was very successful. And I don't know if I realized it or my clients. Mostly, I've been led by my clients over the years, but I realized, hey, I do things differently than all the textbooks. So I was very much at the time doing things like data modeling and database design were very technocratic and very opaque, impenetrable methods. And I was all about involving the business people, the people who knew the business,
Yeah.
because I saw a presentation by this guy named Fred Cross, Kros, I think. And he it was just, to me, such a revelation. He said the design of a database or a data model is directly derivable from the experience of the people who work in the business. And I thought, whoa. And this was at the time I was reading In Search of Excellence, which was all about doing things differently. So I came back home from this conference and I started putting these ideas to work. And it was true that you could get groups of business people together and participate directly in building a concept model or a conceptual data model, if you will, which may not sound too revolutionary now, but in 1985, that was really revolutionary. So right in around there, I realized I do things differently, or my clients told me I do things differently. And so the big break was I decided to build a course. So I
Okay.
built a course on, business friendly data modeling. And I
Okay.
had one of my clients agreed to be the launch client. They said, people love what you're doing. You build a class, we'll sponsor it. And bam, I say bam, but it was a lot of work. But by the way, let me just toss in here. People often ask me, how can I end up in your situation? And I'm
Yeah.
like, what, old, bald, and funny looking? And they say, no, you're a sole proprietor. We are a mom and pop company, but we have a global client base.
Yeah.
And I tell people the first thing to do is build something, build a product. It might be a presentation, it might be a course, it might be a white paper. Build something that demonstrates your unique value proposition. How do you have something to say that's, not just what's in the current press or the current books? So I built this course, and it got offered at one company, and then in no time at all the 10 largest companies in the Vancouver area were using my course. And then I built one on process modeling. And then the big break was a huge tech company in the States heard about my class, brought me down to California to teach it. And it was tough. It was everything from absolute rookies to their internal experts.
Yeah.
Uh, and it went really well. And the next thing you knew, I was doing it all over America. And then they built a certification program around my education, and I was all over the world. And then people from that huge company started going to other companies, and they took my name with me. So I've never done any advertising or marketing. It's all referral and word of mouth.
Word of
And
mouth and
that got
referral.
me all over the
Yeah.
world.
I'm curious. Do you have, and this is a little bit of a business like client acquisition or project or just like getting brought in for workshops and ongoing engagements. Is it a certain level? Is it always the chief data officer, the chief digital officer, the chief architect for the enterprise that brings you in, or can anyone is it groups all over the enterprise that bring you in?
It's all over the enterprise and up and down. It's usually somewhere in the mid level. It's usually people who are feeling the pain of a dysfunctional structure. I mean, I always say in the world of business processes, I like to point out that processes cut across the organization. They cut across all the different functional areas, the divisions and departments. And the people who are working at the interface, where it goes from marketing and sales to fulfillment, and where it goes from fulfillment to manufacturing, and from manufacturing to logistics, those people who feel the pain typically are the ones that bring me in. So sort of a senior management level, often encouraged by people more junior.
Okay.
Once in a while, like I had a great consulting job recently. I've had a few actually where it was C-level executives who said, we need to get some of this stuff. But usually it's mid-level, and then they organize sessions or presentations for their executives. but it usually starts in the middle. With like
Interesting.
my interest is with the people who do the work.
Okay. That's your niche. That's your niche, which is a lot of people that do the work, but not, not everyone's focused on that. So,
Yeah, I mean, I know that we should all be customer focused. We should all care about the business, but more than anything, I care about the people who do the work. And I hope when I come in and do help with a major process redesign initiative, the main thing I'm hoping is that life will be better for the people who do the work. It will be
yep.
better for the enterprise, better for the customer, but I care about the people who do the work.
Right. And it served you well, right? It's
It's
also, I'm sure
yes,
it's gotten good outcomes for your clients, because it's like the stuff that you proposed has worked because you're worried about the people that are doing the work, and then they do the work, and then there's a good outcome, and then you get a referral, and you've been doing this.
it like I for sometimes I've drawn my business model, which is basically imagine three circles. The first one is consulting. And then we go to the next circle, the next bubble, which is develop IP. So I take what I've learned on the job in consulting, and I wrote a book, I build presentations, I develop courses. So that's the second bubble. And then that leads into the third one, which is deliver. So I teach a lot. I teach, I speak at conferences and so on. And then people see me and say, well, he's bald and funny looking, but I like his stories, and it seems like he's got some useful experience. So then I get brought in to do more consulting, and I take what I've learned and I build more IP. So I'm constantly updating my courses and my methods based on what works in real life.
Right. It's practical, it's pragmatic, and it's dare I say simple. But like it's not simple. It's not like yeah, it's common sense, but it's not that common in the business world and across.
But I often say in my workshops that if you have simple but not simplistic techniques and you apply them rigorously but not rigidly, you will get a lot done in a short period of time.
Right.
And that's important to me because I'm not a huge consulting company. Our company is me and my awesome wife Karen, who basically runs the business. And like I can't bring in an army of junior consultants. So when I go into a job, I want to get something useful done quickly, and I want to. I've always stressed helping make the client self-sufficient. So I'm always trying to teach the client to do this on their own. And the funny thing is, the more you do this, the more they want you back. So I'm not being cynical about it, but it's like love. The more you give away, the more you get.
Yeah. Yeah. And compared to the general or like the big firm consulting model, they want their body, they want to get as many people in there for as long as possible. So it's a breath of fresh air.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow. So yeah, that you found a huge opportunity, and I'm curious, how come there's not dozens or hundreds or thousands of independent consultants like yourself?
That's funny. I had this plan for many years that I was going to take all my material and franchise it and have other people teaching the Alec Sharp methodology. But it just never worked out. And my friend, my longtime colleague, Mark Wise, said to me, "Hey, Alec, you're trying to get independent consultants sort of in your stable." And I said, yeah. And he said, there's a reason they're called independent. So the people who have the personality, the experience, the work ethic, they don't need me in my
Right.
courses. So there's a lot of really successful independent consultants out there. They may not be household names,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of them.
Interesting. And so, yeah, you never really built out even with your other contractors or other independent subcontractors, and you never decided to build a big business or a medium boutique business.
Well, there's a whole story there, and that might be chapter three.
Okay.
I'm not sure what chapter three is, but I really was serious about this idea of building a bigger company because that was my metric for success. I was going to be the guy at the top of the pyramid of some sort of a consulting organization. Um, and a couple of things happened. One, I talked to a local consultant, a fellow named Ian Rose here in Vancouver, who was at the time a global human resources consultant. And I told him about my plan to build a company. And he asked me some very tough questions. He said, well, first of all, what makes you think you could run a company? What's the largest organization you've ever run? And I had never run anything. I'd never even run a project. I
Right.
was just like a sole proprietor. And he also said, by the way, I know all of your consultants and they want you. And this is one of the things I've learned. For better or worse, I'm the brand.
Right.
I've got well, that's what people want to hire me.
Yeah.
Then he told me something really interesting, which was a study had been done at the University of British Columbia, which, I'm in Vancouver in
Yeah.
British Columbia. And this study was done by the Sauder School of Business. And it showed that when you look at the person at the top of a consulting organization, anything from one person to 100,000, their earnings are, it's not it's not an incredibly
Exponential.
exponentially rising curve. It's relatively flat. But what does go up is heart attacks, mental illness, all kinds of horrible consequences. And I took that pretty seriously.
Right.
So, and then the other thing was I hired a coach. So I found a business coach, happened to be somebody locally that I could occasionally meet with face to face, and I wanted her to take me to the point where I was running this franchise business. Other people were teaching my workshops, and I remember I was sitting in the lobby of the Embassy Suites in Tigard, Oregon, because I was running a workshop in the area and I was doing my homework. I was finishing up describing the processes it would take to get me there and the processes it would take to sustain this business. And I looked at this and I realized, I don't want to do this. This looks like having a job. And I like being in front of a room full of people with a flip chart and a pen. I like doing the work. I don't want to manage it. So I reported back to Carol, my coach. I said, well, thank you. You've helped me realize this is not what I want to do. And it was like a lead knapsack was lifted off my back. I didn't have to feel like a failure because I
Wow.
hadn't built a big company. I was like, okay, I'm a really successful independent consultant.
Right.
And I have a mom and pop business. And by the way, I did around the same time, I had a number of subcontractors working for me. It was very lucrative, but eventually I realized I was worrying more about them and putting shoes on their children's feet
Yeah.
than it was about me, even though they weren't even employees.
Right.
So
Wow.
I wrapped that up. They were very grateful for what I'd done, but I wrapped that up, and my wife and I since then we've been sole proprietors
Wow.
and
That's
very happy.
really good lessons and learnings and testing, tests and then iterating. So to wrap up, Alec, I think right before we were recording, you mentioned like things that, oh, we don't need this anymore, or like, patterns that you've recognized over the last decades.
Yeah. Well, this the one that always comes to mind is a lot of like basically I know that as a consultant, what I do is I'm a facilitator. Eventually, I figured out or my clients figured out I'm a good facilitator, and which has led to all kinds of really interesting jobs. But in terms of the subject matter, I'm an expert on data modeling, concept modeling, and on business process change, process modeling, and process improvement, and so on. Now, in the area of data modeling, which is really all about engaging the business in building visual and narrative models of the things they need to know about. A customer, a product, a lot, an order, a site, and so on. And starting like way back in the 80s, people would be telling me, we don't need that anymore. The first time somebody told me this, a client said, we won't need your data modeling classes anymore because we're going client server. I was like, what? What in the world does that have to do with anything? And
Yeah.
then it was, we don't need this anymore because we're into rapid application development and prototyping. And then it was, we don't need it because we're going object oriented. And then, the classic, we don't need it because we're using software packages and the vendor has figured this all out. Or we don't need it because we're agile or big data or analytics and always within 2 years, those are the people who are in my workshops.
Right.
So I had a huge tech company a few years ago asked me if I could build a data modeling for data scientists class. This was when data science was the big thing.
It's hot.
And
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I'd love to. But I don't have enough expertise. But why do you need that? Well, our data scientists have the greatest algorithms, but they don't seem to understand that
The business.
marketing, logistics, and operations all have a different definition of customer.
Yeah.
So they're putting data together the
And
wrong
it just,
way.
yeah, it's useless.
Yeah. And this year it's AI, which
Flavor. Yeah, the flavor of the year, the flavor of the industry trend, and then you just keep doing your own thing and then it comes back. So
yep. And like my big challenge now is I'm trying to taper down. My wife unbelievably wants me at home more, but there's more demand than ever
yeah.
for what I do. And like it's really becoming this huge, especially in Europe, this groundswell of realization that if you don't understand the concept model, the data, the things, whatever you want to call it, everything else is kind of built on a foundation of sand.
Yeah,
And
yeah, a
AI is the
shaky.
same.
Yeah. Yeah. It's simple but not simplistic, and it's just sticking to the fundamentals.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, if people are interested in learning more, where would you point them?
Well, to my out of date website,
Okay.
Claritech, CLARITEQ.com. But best is just contact me. A
Okay.
Sharp, ASHARP at claritech.com. I'm sure you'll have it in the write up somewhere.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes, and we'll
Okay.
also include the lucid chart webisode series that you did.
Sure. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
I think I might go so far as to say that might be a must watch or must listen up front, to get an idea for the work that you do, to really visualize it and see it. Cause we're having this a little bit abstract conversation here, but to really like those webinars are really good.
Yeah, my wife gave me a little grief because, in a way, I gave away the farm. I mean, in the course of the 8 webisodes, that's basically my entire process improvement methodology.
Yeah.
But like I
Hey, it's
said,
available
it's
for
like
free.
love.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
more
yeah.
you give away.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, this has been great, and we're just at 30 minutes, so we nailed the
Okay.
timing too. We landed it.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks so
Take care,
much,
everyone.
Andre.
Thanks.
It was fun.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and also share it out on LinkedIn or with friends, colleagues, or classmates who might like the show as well. You can also get the newsletter at leaderlev.com/podcast. You can find that also in the show notes.